The October wind descended from the high peaks, with relentless force sweeping through Echo Canyon in howling gusts that stripped the last golden leaves from the aspens and sent them tumbling across the rocky ground. The year was 1870, deep in the Utah Territory, where the land stretched vast and indifferent beneath a pewter sky. The canyon walls rose sheer and striped with rust-red sandstone carved over millennia by wind and water. At its mouth, where the canyon opened onto rolling prairie, one solitary maple blazed crimson against the drab landscape. Quanah brought his bay gelding to a halt at the edge of a small clearing, his body still, but his eyes constantly moving, reading the terrain with ingrained wariness. Behind him, pressed against his back with small arms, wrapped tight rode Star, 4 years old, silent since the day her mother had died, coughing blood 2 winters past. Across his lap, wrapped in a faded blanket, lay little Elk, 7 years old, burning with fever that had struck 3 days ago and would not break, despite willow bark, tea, and prayers. He needed medicine. White man's medicine. But the settlements had turned him away. Too many saw only his braids and skin, and remembered newspaper lies about savage Indians. Desperation had brought him here to this isolated cabin, marked on a trader's map. The cabin crouched low against the slope, built of rough logs, with a cedar shake roof weighted by river stones. Smoke rose from the fieldstone chimney. On the porch stood a woman, late 20s, dark blonde hair pulled severely back, wearing a patched calico dress. At her hip stood a boy of about 6, pale-haired and blue-eyed, his hands clutching his mother's skirt. Quanah dismounted slowly, keeping his movements visible and non-threatening. Stars slid down her fingers, immediately gripping the fringe of his leggings. The woman's hand moved to her son's shoulder, protective instinct, her eyes traveling from Quanah's face to his weapons to the fevered child. "Your son needs a father." Quanah said, his English clear despite its accent. "My daughter needs a mother. My son needs medicine I cannot get alone. I ask for help. I can work, hunt, cut wood, repair what is broken. I have silver to pay." The woman said nothing, her jaw tightening as she weighed his words. The silence stretched, filled only by wind and a distant raven's cry. Then, sharp and sudden, a rifle shot cracked across the prairie. The gelding jerked violently. Quanah spun, pushing Star behind him, scanning for the shooter. The shot had come from distance 500 yards, from a low ridge south. Not close enough to hit, but close enough to send a message. You are watched. "Get inside," the woman snapped. She grabbed her boy and yanked him toward the door. "Now both of you." Quanah scooped Star into one arm, cradled little Elk with the other, and ran for the porch. The woman held the door just long enough for him to slip through before slamming it shut. The heavy bar dropped with a solid thunk. Inside was dim, lit by fire and lamplight, smelling of wood smoke and poverty. The woman turned to face him, and in the close space, he could see exhaustion etched around her eyes. "Who is shooting at you?" she demanded. "I do not know for certain. But they followed me from the ford, 3 miles back." "Why?" "Because I am Lakota. Because I asked about medicine. Because I exist where whites think I should not." He looked at little Elk. "My son needs feverfew willow bark quinine if you have it." Her expression shifted hardness, giving way to something like compassion. She moved closer and pressed her hand to little Elk's forehead. Her fingers were rough but gentle. "High fever. How long?" 3 days. It comes in waves, burning hot, then shaking. Sweats between. Could be mountain fever. I have willow bark and bone set. No quinine too expensive." She glanced at Star. "The girl's sick too." "No, just frightened. She has not spoken since her mother died." The woman nodded, as if this made sense. "Peter," she said to her son, Fetch the herb basket from the shelf and the small iron pot. The boy moved quickly, retrieving both with careful competence. The woman took them. Sit, she said, gesturing to a bench. Let me examine him properly. Quanah sat arranging Little Elk across his lap. Star climbed beside him. The woman knelt and began examining the boy, feeling glands, checking eyes, listening to breathing. I am Eliza Harper, she said without looking up. Widow. My husband built this cabin. He died in the mine 5 months ago. Tunnel collapse, they said. I have been alone since with Peter. She glanced up. And you, Quanah, called Silent Rain, also widowed. 2 winters passed. Consumption took my wife. Took my father too in London. She sat back. Your son does not have consumption. This is acute fever, contaminated water, maybe insect bite. I can bring it down with willow bark and compresses, but he needs rest, clean water, and time. You cannot travel with him like this. The cold will kill him faster than fever. Quanah absorbed this. To stay meant risk from whoever fired that shot, but to leave meant Little Elk would die on the trail. I can work. Hunt, cut wood, repair your stable, earn shelter. Eliza studied him, then looked at Star. Something softened. I do not need payment. I need help. The mine foreman Pike has been claiming my husband owed money. Wants me to work it off or surrender the cabin. I cannot do either. She stood. If you are here armed, Pike might think twice. And if you hunt, we eat better than we have in months. That is fair dealing. Trade, not charity. Exactly. So we have agreement. Quanah looked at Little Elk, at Star, at young Peter. We have agreement. Night fell hard. Eliza dosed Little Elk with willow bark tea while Quanah held him steady. She soaked rags in cool water and laid them across his forehead and chest, changing them as they warmed. When she handed Quanah a cloth, their fingers brushed rough calluses, warm skin, lasting a heartbeat longer than necessary. Neither pulled away immediately. Peter fell asleep by the fire. Star, after quiet coaxing from Quanah in Lakota, finally lay down beside him. Eliza banked the fire and climbed to the sleeping loft. Quanah sat on the floor beside Little Elk rifle across his knees and listened to the night-breathing children, creaking loft, scratching mice, distant coyotes, endless wind. In his pocket was an arrowhead shard, all that remained of the sacred object his grandfather had made that Quanah had sold in desperation 6 months ago. He took it out, turning it in the faint firelight. A reminder of failure, of how far he had fallen. But then he looked at Little Elk, sleeping more peacefully, and thought perhaps his grandfather would understand. Survival was not always noble. Sometimes it was just necessary. Dawn came gray. Little Elk's eyes opened clear for the first time in days. Thirsty, he whispered. Relief flooded Quanah. He helped his son drink, and the boy kept the water down before exhaustion claimed him again. But his skin was cooler. The fever had broken. Eliza descended and checked him with practiced efficiency. The crisis has passed. He is not safe yet, but this is good progress. She looked at Quanah. Your son is a fighter. He gets that from his mother. They ate cornmeal mush fried in precious bacon fat, and Eliza said, We need to talk about what comes next. If Pike's men saw you arrive, they will report back. Pike will come probably today. We need a story. What kind? You are a scout I hired to hunt and provide protection. Legitimate business. It gives you legal right to be here and forces Pike to recalculate. Will he believe it? Probably not. But it buys time. Her eyes hardened. Time to find what he is really hiding. Because the debt he claims, it is a lie. Thomas kept perfect accounts. But the night before he died, he came home upset. Said he saw something in the mine that did not make sense. Next day, the tunnel collapsed with him inside. I think Pike had him killed. Then we find proof. Before she could respond, harness jingled outside. Multiple horses. Eliza went pale. Pike's men. A fist hammered the door. Mrs. Harper, open up. Eliza lifted the bar and cracked the door, blocking the interior. Outside stood a broad man with a gray beard, Caleb Wade Pike's enforcer, wearing a gun and company badge. Morning, ma'am. Pike heard about an Indian on your property. Folks are nervous. We came to check your welfare. My welfare is fine. Leave. Well, that is good. But if you are fine, maybe you can pay that debt Thomas left. $44, Mrs. Harper. I owe nothing. Those ledgers are forgeries. Serious accusation, ma'am. You got proof? Then Quanah stepped into view, hand resting on his knife. The lady asked you to leave? It would be wise to listen. Caleb's face flushed. Who are you? The man she hired to provide protection, legal employment, which means I have every right to defend this property from trespass and threat. You are trespassing. Leave while you can still walk. You threatening me, redskin? If you draw that weapon, I assume you intend to use it. I can put my knife through your throat before your gun clears leather. I have done it before. The standoff hung in cold air. Then one of the younger men spoke nervously. Maybe we should report back, Caleb. Let Pike decide. Caleb glared, but finally spat tobacco on the porch boards and stomped to his horse. This is not finished, Mrs. Harper. Not by a long shot. They rode off slowly, deliberately. Eliza closed the door hands, shaking. They will be back with more men. Then we move fast. You said someone might know the mine. Dr. Bell. He treats injured miners underground, knows the layout, and he hates Pike. Then we see him today. They prepared quickly, bundling the children against the cold. They could not leave them alone. They slipped into the forest behind the cabin Quanah, leading through dense timber where horses could not follow. The journey took 2 hours, stopping frequently to rest Little Elk still weak. They reached Dr. Bell's cabin at Echo Crossing's southern edge. Quanah knocked softly. The door opened, revealing a gray-haired man with spectacles and a pronounced limp. Mrs. Harper, I heard rumors. His eyes took in Quanah, the weapons, the children. Inside quickly. The cabin smelled of carbolic and blood. Bell's instruments lay on clean cloth, his shelves lined with mostly empty bottles. He examined Little Elk briefly. The fever broke, but he is weak. Needs rest. He straightened. You did not come for medical opinion. What does you need? Eliza handed him Pike's forged debt notice. Bell read it, frowning. Obvious fraud. But Sheriff Lott is in Pike's pocket. He will not help. We know. That is why we need proof of what Pike is really doing. Eliza took a breath. My husband saw something in the mine before he died. Something important. Next day he was dead. I believe Pike murdered him. Bell was silent, wrestling with knowledge. Finally, he pulled out a hand-drawn mine map. 4 months ago, I was called to Tunnel 7, deepest tunnel nearly a mile in, treating a crushed worker. While waiting, I saw wooden crates covered with tarps. One was open. Inside artifacts, Indian artifacts, arrowheads, pottery, beadwork, ceremonial items, dozens, maybe hundreds. Quanah went absolutely still, his voice cold. What kind specifically? Lakota, I believe. Distinctive beadwork, geometric blue and white. Stone tools, painted hides, medicine bags. All packed carefully for shipment. Where is this cache? Bell pointed to the map. Here, 3/4 mile in Tunnel 7. Side passage easy to miss. Chamber 30 feet back. But he hesitated. I asked the shift foreman, Charlie Garrett. He looked terrified, told me to forget it. Where is Garrett now? Dead. Fell down a shaft 3 weeks later. Another accident. Fury filled Quanah cold and bright. Those artifacts were not just objects, they were his people's history, their sacred trust. Graves had been robbed, spirits disturbed, men murdered to hide it. Where exactly in Tunnel 7? Bell traced the route on his map. But the tunnel is condemned unstable, dangerous, and the entrance is guarded day and night. When do guards change? Midnight. 20 to 30 minutes of confusion. That is your window. Can you watch the children? Bell hesitated, then nodded. Yes. Martha Kincaid will help. The schoolhouse has a root cellar. We can hide them if needed. They spent the day resting and preparing. When Martha arrived, stern woman with iron-gray hair, she took charge of the children, efficiently bringing books and candy. As sunset approached, Quanah and Eliza prepared. Bell loaned them a shuttered lantern rope and pry bar. Kincaid pressed a revolver into Eliza's hand. Know how to use this. My father taught me in London. Good, because if Pike's men find you, they will kill you both. They said goodbye to the children. Peter clung tearfully, but nodded bravely. Star touched Quanah's face with one small hand, then let Martha lead her away. Little Elk gripped his father's hand. Will you come back? The boy asked in Lakota. I swear it on your mother's memory. I will return. At midnight, under a moonless sky, they moved upstream toward the mine. 2 torches bracketed the timber-framed entrance. 2 guards sat inside, one dozing, one smoking. Quanah and Eliza crouched 30 yards away in the darkness. I will deal with the guards. Quanah breathed. When I whistle 2 short notes, come quickly. He melted into darkness before she could reply. Minutes crawled past. Then a sound, a scrape, a curse. The smoking guard straightened, peering into blackness. Jake, that's you. He picked up his rifle and stepped toward the sound. Quanah materialized behind him, one hand over his mouth, the other arm around his throat. The guard struggled for seconds and then went limp. Quanah lowered him silently. The second guard never woke. Quanah struck precisely at the skull base with his knife pommel. The Nighthawk whistle came. Eliza ran forward. Both guards lay unconscious but breathing. Inside, now. They entered the mine, and darkness swallowed them. Quanah lit the shuttered lantern, opening it just a crack. The tunnel stretched ahead, rough stone walls, massive timber supports creaking under mountain-weight air, cold and damp with the smell of rock dust and powder residue. They moved deeper, following the main shaft. Side tunnels branched at intervals marked with numbers. At 3/4 mile, breathing hard, they found Tunnel 7. A chain stretched across a sign reading, Condemned Structural Damage, No Entry, by order of E. Pike. Quanah unhooked the chain. The tunnel here was narrower, ceiling, lower damage visible, cracked timbers, partial cave-in. They had to climb over raising, choking dust. Past the rockfall, they found it a side passage barely wider than shoulders. Quanah widened the lantern. Wooden crates, 15 or 20 covered with tarps. Quanah set the lantern down and pried open the nearest crate. Inside, packed in straw, were arrowheads, masterworks of stone, beveled and polished, marked with sacred symbols. He lifted one with trembling hands, recognizing his grandfather's work instantly. These were taken from burial sites, he said, voice vibrating with rage. Sacred places where my people laid their dead with objects for the next world. Places never to be disturbed. Pike has been robbing graves, selling sacred objects like trinkets. Eliza opened another crate, pottery beaded belts, a medicine bag still fragrant with sage. In a third, she found papers, invoices, manifests, letters. Look, she said urgently, holding up a letter. From a London dealer, Gresham Street, acknowledging receipt of 6 Lakota ceremonial arrowheads for $200. She shuffled papers. And this, a mine payroll sheet. Thomas's name with a red notation, docked for contraband discovery. Permanent removal authorized. The words hung heavy. Permanent removal. Murder planned and authorized. We have him, Eliza whispered. Proof of theft, smuggling, murder. Voices echoed from the main tunnel, growing closer. Footsteps, lamplight, flickering on walls. They know we are here. Quanah grabbed papers and arrowheads, stuffing them inside his shirt. Move. They are between us and the exit. We are trapped. Quanah's eyes found a narrow fissure in the back wall. There, through that crack. It might lead out. It is our only chance. What about light? He shuttered the lantern, completely plunging them into absolute darkness. We go blind. Hold my belt. Do not let go. She squeezed through the fissure's sideways rock, tearing her dress and scraping skin. Quanah followed, shoulders barely fitting. Behind them, shouts. They were here, search every inch. They pushed forward through twisting passage, then emerged into an older abandoned tunnel. Quanah cracked the lantern open. Ahead, the sound of running water. Follow the water. It leads out. They ran, stumbling over debris, splashing through an underground stream, freezing water soaking their boots. The tunnel sloped upward, good sign. Ahead, faint starlight filtered through a crack. The opening was narrow, 10 feet up a natural ramp. Quanah boosted Eliza through. She emerged onto a steep mountainside of loose scree. Quanah squeezed through just as shouts echoed from below. Run! They slid down the treacherous slope, Eliza falling once, Quanah holding her up. They reached the tree line and plunged into darkness, only stopping when deep enough to feel momentarily safe. They collapsed against a pine, gasping. Quanah checked the papers, crumpled but legible. We got enough. Now we make sure it reaches someone who will act. They made their way carefully through dark forest, back to Belle's cabin, arriving just before dawn. Belle let them in with relief, tending their wounds, while they caught their breath. When they were warm and had coffee, Eliza spread the evidence on Belle's table. He studied it with growing anger. This is enough to hang Pike, if you get it to someone with authority. The territorial marshal? Too far through Pike's territory. Fort Douglas, Army Post 2 days south. Captain John Morris commands. He is honest by the book, hates civilians who provoke tribes. Show him proof Pike has been looting Lakota graves, and Morris will act. Pike will send men after us. Then ride fast and smart. I will spread false word you went west. That might confuse them a day or two. Belle gathered supplies. I will give you my spare horse, and I will hide the children's schoolhouse root cellar barricaded. No one will find them. Eliza looked at Quanah. They understood the choice, leave their children with near strangers and ride into danger. Terrible, but necessary. We leave within the hour, Eliza said. They woke the children for goodbyes. Peter clung tearfully, but nodded when asked to be strong. Star touched her father's face gently. Little Elk gripped his hand. Will you come back? I swear it on your mother's memory. By sunrise, Quanah and Eliza were 5 miles south, riding hard on Belle's mare and Quanah's gelding evidence secured in a leather pouch across Quanah's chest. Behind them, Pike received news of the violated cache and sent 8 hunters with orders, kill them both. Recover the evidence. Leave no witnesses. They rode through terrain that grew progressively wilder. Red sandstone cliffs, juniper-studded slopes, high desert where the wind never stopped. By noon, having covered 20 miles, the horses were laboring. They stopped at a spring bubbling from moss-covered rocks. "How far to the fort?" Eliza asked, washing blood from a cut. 40 miles. If we ride through the night, we reach it tomorrow afternoon." Quanah scanned the back trail. "But they are following. I feel it." "How many?" "6, maybe 8. Pike's best men. This will not be easy." They pushed on into higher country. By afternoon, clouds gathered and snow began falling light at first, then steadily heavier until visibility dropped to 30 yards. The trail climbed into a narrow gorge where cliffs pressed close. As they entered the gorge, Quanah raised his hand, signaling halt. Something felt wrong. He dismounted, studying the ground. Fresh tracks, multiple horses stopped here recently, then moved forward. "They are ahead of us," he said quietly. "Ambush." Before Eliza could respond, rifles cracked from both sides of the gorge. Bullets whined off rocks, spraying stone chips. Quanah grabbed Eliza, pulling her down behind a boulder as her horse screamed and bolted. His gelding reared, wild-eyed. "Stay down." He returned fire, his rifle cracking steadily. Above, muzzle flashes revealed positions: 3 shooters on the left cliff, 2 on the right. Eliza drew her revolver with shaking hands and fired at movement, missing but forcing a man to duck. Quanah worked methodically, sight fire lever new round. One attacker jerked and fell tumbling down the cliff face. "We cannot hold here," Eliza shouted over gunfire. "They will flank us. The gorge narrows ahead, better cover. Can you run?" "Yes." "When I fire next 3 shots, run for that rock cluster. Go." He fired rapidly, forcing heads down. Eliza ran low and fast, reaching the rocks just as bullets kicked up dirt around her feet. Quanah followed, sliding in beside her. But his gelding, panicked by gunfire, bolted back the way they came, taking their supplies, food blankets. "Blast it!" Quanah cursed. Now they had only Eliza's mare and minimal gear. The ambushers pressed forward, emboldened. But the narrowing gorge worked against them. They had to come single file, losing their advantage. Quanah picked off another, with careful aim. The others hesitated, realizing frontal assault was suicide. Then from behind their position, footsteps crunched on snow. Quanah spun, bringing his rifle around. A man stepped into view, tall, wearing buckskin, his face painted with war markings. But he was Lakota, and he was grinning. "Silent rain," the man said in Lakota. "It has been many years." Quanah's blood ran cold. He knew that voice, that face beneath the paint. "Shadowhawk. You remember. Good." Shadowhawk's grin widened, cruel. "Pike pays well to hunt you. But I would do this for free. Your family dishonored mine when your father refused my sister's marriage proposal. He called her unworthy. She died of shame. I have waited years for vengeance." That was not dishonor, it was his right to choose. Quanah kept his rifle steady. "And you dishonor yourself working for the man who robs our ancestors' graves. Pike gives me what I need: gold, weapons, and the chance to kill you." Shadowhawk drew a knife. "I told Pike I would take you alive so he could recover his precious evidence. But accidents happen." He lunged. Quanah barely blocked with his rifle barrel the knife scraping metal. They grappled, Shadowhawk trying to drive the blade into Quanah's throat. Quanah twisted, using his opponent's momentum to throw him against the rock face. Shadowhawk recovered instantly, circling, feinting. Eliza fired her revolver, but Shadowhawk dodged impossibly fast. "Stay back," Quanah shouted to her. "This is mine." Shadowhawk attacked again, knife flashing. Quanah drew his own blade, and they circled, steel clashing in the snow. Both were expert fighters trained from childhood. Shadowhawk was slightly faster, Quanah slightly stronger. They traded cuts, Shadowhawk opening a line across Quanah's forearm, Quanah slashing his opponent's thigh. From the gorge entrance, Pike's remaining men were advancing, sensing opportunity. Eliza fired methodically, forcing them to cover, but her ammunition was limited. "We cannot win this," she called desperately. Shadowhawk laughed. "Hear that silent rain. Your woman knows truth. Surrender the evidence, and I will kill you quickly. Refuse, and I make it last days." Quanah's mind raced. They were trapped enemies ahead, and behind low ammunition, one horse in a snowstorm. But then he remembered his grandfather's teaching. When the enemy surrounds you, change the battlefield. "Eliza," he shouted. "The mare mount up. When I say run, ride hard downstream, do not look back. I will not leave you. You must get the evidence to Fort Douglas, that is all that matters." Before she could argue, Quanah did something desperate. He feinted at Shadowhawk, then pivoted and grabbed a burning brand from their small fire, hurling it at the overhanging snow cornice above the gorge entrance. The heat, impact, and vibration triggered what he hoped for: a small avalanche. Snow and rock thundered down, cutting off Pike's men, burying two and scattering the rest. In the chaos, Quanah shouted, "Now run!" Eliza hesitated one heartbeat, their eyes meeting, and in that moment something passed between them that transcended words. Fear for each other. Trust absolute. The bond forged through shared survival, now tested in fire. Then she mounted the mare and spurred it into a gallop, downstream snow flying from its hooves. Shadowhawk lunged to stop her, but Quanah intercepted, taking a knife cut to his ribs as he tackled his enemy. They rolled in the snow, grappling desperately. Shadowhawk was on top, knife descending toward Quanah's throat. Quanah caught his wrist muscles straining. "I do not want to kill you," he gasped. "You are still Lakota. I stopped being Lakota when I chose revenge over honor." Shadowhawk snarled, pressing down with all his weight. With his free hand, Quanah grabbed a rock and smashed it into Shadowhawk's temple. His opponent's eyes rolled back, and he collapsed sideways, unconscious, but breathing. Quanah staggered upright, bleeding from ribs and arm, and saw Eliza disappearing into the storm on the mare. Behind him, Pike's men were digging through the avalanche debris. He had minutes at most. He could not outrun them on foot, could not fight them all wounded. So he did the only thing left. He ran perpendicular to the gorge, climbing the steep slope into the blinding storm, leaving an obvious trail they would have to follow, drawing them away from Eliza's path. Hours blurred. Quanah climbed through snow and darkness, cold seeping into his bones, blood soaking his shirt. Behind shouts and lamplight followed. He set false trails, doubled back, used every tracking trick his father taught him. Slowly, impossibly, he lost them in the storm. As dawn broke gray and cold, Quanah collapsed in a sheltered hollow beneath a rock overhang his body, shutting down from blood loss and exposure. His last conscious thought was of Eliza, and whether she had made it through, whether the evidence was safe, whether he would ever see his children again. And beneath that, another thought, surprising in its clarity: I do not want to leave her. Not now. Not when I have just begun to understand what she means to me. Eliza rode through the night, the mare laboring beneath her terror and determination, keeping her upright in the saddle. She heard gunfire behind her, distant pops, almost lost in the wind, and knew Quanah was fighting to give her time. Tears froze on her cheeks. She had left him. She had run while he faced death alone. But she carried the evidence. That was what mattered. That was what he had sacrificed himself for. The storm intensified, turning the world into white chaos. She could barely see the mare's ears, let alone the trail. The horse stumbled repeatedly, exhausted and disoriented. Finally, as false dawn broke, the mare simply stopped, trembling and unable to go further. Eliza dismounted on legs that barely held her, and looked around desperately. Through breaks in the snow, she saw something structures smoke a flag. Fort Douglas. She had made it. She staggered forward, leading the mare, and collapsed at the gate. Soldiers rushed out, catching her before she hit the ground. "Evidence," she gasped. "Captain Morris, Pike, murder, Lakota graves." They carried her inside to warmth and safety. Captain John Morris, stern man, early 40s, with iron-gray hair and piercing blue eyes, read the documents she handed him with growing fury. He questioned her thoroughly, sharp questions, testing the truth of her story, seeking inconsistencies. When she described the cache in Tunnel 7, he made her draw a map from memory. When she mentioned Shadowhawk, he consulted records and confirmed a Lakota tracker had been seen in Pike's employ. When she spoke of Thomas Harper's death, he pulled territorial records showing the mining company had reported no such accident officially, a glaring omission that raised immediate suspicion. "This is damning," he said finally. "If authentic, and it appears to be Pike, has committed federal crimes. Trafficking in stolen cultural property, desecration of native burial sites, conspiracy to commit murder, and likely murder itself." He stood decisively. "I am sending a full company north immediately. We will arrest Pike and secure the mine." "There is a man," Eliza said urgently, gripping his arm. "Quanah. He held them off so I could escape. He drew Pike's hunters away from me. He might still be alive. You have to find him. Please." Morris studied her face, seeing something there that made him nod slowly. "We will search. I give you my word. And your children, you said they are hidden. Dr. Bell has them. Schoolhouse root cellar in Echo Crossing. We will secure them first. They will be brought here under military escort." He paused. "Rest, Mrs. Harper. You have done more than anyone could expect. You have ridden through a blizzard, evaded armed killers, and brought evidence that will bring a murderer to justice. That takes remarkable courage." "It was not courage," Eliza said quietly. "It was necessity, and I did not do it alone. Quanah gave me the chance to escape. He sacrificed himself. If he is dead—" Her voice broke. "If he is dead, it is because I left him. You did what he asked. That is honor, not betrayal." Morris's expression softened fractionally. "I have seen much on this frontier, Mrs. Harper. Men who claim honor but have none, and those who claim nothing but live it every day. Your friend Quanah sounds like the latter. We will find him if he can be found." The next 3 days blurred for Eliza. She was treated for frostbite and exhaustion, her fingers and toes wrapped in bandages, her body forced to rest in a clean infirmary bed. But she could not truly rest. She slept in fits, haunted by images of Quanah fighting alone, bleeding in the snow, dying while she rode to safety. When she woke, she demanded updates until the medical staff grew exasperated. The fort chaplain tried to counsel her about accepting God's will. She told him curtly that God's will was less relevant than Morris's search parties, and if he truly wished to help, he could pray they found Quanah alive. On the 4th day, Morris entered her room, his expression unreadable. Eliza sat up immediately, heart hammering. "Mrs. Harper, my patrol returned from Echo Canyon." Her breath stopped. "And Pike is in custody along with 6 of his men. We found him attempting to destroy evidence in the mine, ironically that confirmed his guilt more thoroughly than anything else could have. The artifacts have been secured and will be returned to the Lakota Nation. Your children are safe. Dr. Bell and Miss Kincaid protected them exactly as promised. They are being brought here now under escort. And Quanah—" Her voice was barely a whisper. Morris's expression softened. "We found him 2 miles from the ambush site, unconscious, in a snow shelter he had built. Severe blood loss exposure, multiple wounds. He had managed to pack his wounds with moss and snow, likely saved his own life with that field medicine. But it was near thing. My surgeon says he will recover, though it was touch and go the first night. Relief flooded through Eliza so intensely, she could not speak, could not breathe, could only nod as tears streamed down her face. She covered her mouth with both hands, shoulders shaking. Morris waited patiently until she regained composure. He is in the post hospital, awake now, asking about you and the children. If you wish to see him, I can have an orderly take you there. She was out of bed before Morris finished speaking, ignoring the medical staff's protests, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders, and following the captain through cold corridors to the hospital ward. The ward was long and narrow, lined with cots. Most were empty. The fort had seen little action recently. Quanah lay near the back, propped slightly upright, stripped to the waist, his torso wrapped in clean bandages. His face was pale, but his eyes were open and clear. A Lakota medicine man sat beside him, elderly, weathered, wearing traditional dress, speaking quietly in their language. When Quanah saw Eliza, something in his expression cracked relief and emotion. He had been holding back the mask of stoic endurance, finally falling away. Eliza. His voice was rough from disuse. You made it. The evidence? Safe. Pike is arrested. The children are coming. She moved to his bedside, and without thinking, without hesitation, she took his hand. His fingers closed around hers immediately, grip weak but deliberate. You almost died, you stubborn fool. You sent me away. Had to. The evidence was all that mattered. You mattered. The words burst out before she could stop them, raw and honest and loud enough that the medicine man looked up with interest. You mattered to me. When I was riding away, hearing gunfire, thinking you were dying. She stopped fighting for composure. I have lost one man I cared for. I could not bear losing another. Not you. Not after everything. Quanah's hand tightened on hers. For a long moment he simply looked at her, and she saw in his eyes the same realization that had struck her in the storm, and that this had become more than partnership, more than alliance born of necessity. I did not think I would see you again, he said quietly. Or my children. When I was building that shelter, barely able to move, I kept thinking. I have unfinished things, words unsaid, to you, to them. That was... He paused, searching for words. That was harder than the cold. The medicine man stood quietly, gathering his things. I will return later, he said in accented English, his eyes twinkling with knowing amusement. You have much to discuss. When they were alone, Eliza whispered, What words? When you were mounting that horse ready to ride, and you looked back at me. Quanah took a careful breath, mindful of cracked ribs. I saw in your face something I did not expect to see. Fear for me. Not just for the mission or the evidence. For me. And I realized I felt the same. That somewhere between the cabin and the mine and that gorge you had become. He stopped, uncertain. Essential, Eliza finished softly. You had become essential. Not just as ally or partner, as the person I wanted to survive for. To return to. Yes, the word was barely audible. That. They sat in silence, hands clasped, too much to say, and no adequate words. Finally, Eliza said, When you were fighting Shadowhawk, I wanted to help but could not. I felt so helpless, and so angry at him for attacking you at Pike, for setting this in motion, at myself for not being stronger or faster. You did help. You got the evidence out. You finished what we started. He paused. Shadowhawk. He was Lakota. That made it harder. He chose revenge over honor, but I still did not want to kill him. When I hit him with that rock, I was relieved to see him still breathing. I think he lives, unless Pike's men killed him after. I will carry that uncertainty. Does that trouble you? Yes, and no. Some choices are only bad or worse. I chose worse, leaving him unconscious in the snow, unknown fate. Perhaps he survived, perhaps not. Perhaps Pike's men killed him, perhaps they did not. I will carry that doubt. But I would make the same choice again to give you time to escape. His eyes met hers. I would make any choice, pay any cost to see you safe. And I rode away from you, left you to face them alone. Eliza said, voice thick. Do you know how that felt? Every stride the mare took, I wanted to turn back. But I knew if I did, your sacrifice would be meaningless. So I rode, and hated myself for it. Do not. Quanah's grip tightened. You did exactly right. You honored my choice by completing the mission. That is partnership. That is trust. It is also love. Eliza said quietly, the word finally spoken aloud. Because I did not feel this way about Thomas, much as I cared for him. I did not feel this terror at possibly losing him, this relief at finding him alive. What I feel for you is... She stopped, gathering courage. What I feel for you is different, deeper, forged in fire and blood and impossible choices. I love you, Quanah. I did not mean to, but I do. The silence stretched. Then Quanah raised their joined hands to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. When I was delirious from fever in the snow shelter, I dreamed. Not of my first wife, though I loved her deeply. I dreamed of you, of your voice calling me back, of your hand in mine, of a future where I woke beside you every morning and we faced each day together. When I woke and found soldiers instead, my first thought was, I will never get to tell her. He paused. So, I tell you now. I love you, Eliza Harper. I love your strength and your clever mind, and the way you never flinch from hard truth. I love how you care for my children as fiercely as your own. I love how you look at sunset with that expression of contentment, like you have finally found home. And I love that you rode through a blizzard exhausted and frightened because you trusted me enough to complete what we started together. Tears slipped down Eliza's face. We are a fine pair. Widowed poor, hunted by killers, declaring love in an army hospital. Is there a better place? Quanah's lips quirked slightly. We have never done things conventionally. True? She wiped her eyes. What happens now? Now we heal. We testify. We get our children back. We see Pike hanged. We recover what was stolen. He paused. And then we decide what kind of life we want to build. Together, if you will have me. I will have you. Eliza leaned forward carefully and kissed him gentle, mindful of his injuries, but unmistakably a promise. When she pulled back, both were smiling. Though we should probably discuss practical matters, like where we live, how we manage 4 children, whether territorial law will even recognize a union between us. Practical matters can wait until I can stand without falling over. Quanah said, for now, just stay, please. So she stayed sitting beside his cot, holding his hand, talking quietly about small things, the children's growth, Dr. Bell's kindness, the quality of army coffee, until exhaustion claimed him, and he slept. She remained even then unwilling to leave, until a nurse gently insisted she return to her own bed to rest. The children arrived the next day, brought by Dr. Bell and Martha Kincaid under military escort. The reunion was chaotic and tearful. Star and Little Elk rushed to Quanah's bedside, carefully avoiding his bandages, Star's eyes welling with tears as she touched his face. Peter flung himself at his mother, who caught him and held tight. "You came back," Little Elk said in Lakota voice shaking. "You promised and you came back. Always," Quanah said, gathering both his children close with his good arm. "Always, my son, my daughter. I will always come back." Star, who had not spoken in 2 years, looked at Eliza and said clearly, "You came back too. You kept Papa safe." The room went silent. Eliza's breath caught tears springing to her eyes. "Yes, sweetheart. I came back. We both did. We are a family now." "Papa?" Peter asked, looking uncertainly between his mother and Quanah. "Is Quanah our papa now?" Eliza glanced at Quanah, who nodded slightly. "If you want him to be," she said, "and if he wants to be." "I want to be," Quanah said firmly. "If you will have me, Peter, I cannot replace your first papa, but I can try to be worthy of the name." Peter considered this with 6-year-old seriousness, then nodded. "Okay, you can be papa, but you have to teach me to track like you taught Little Elk." "Deal." For long moments, the reunited families simply held each other, Dr. Bell and Kincaid watching with satisfaction. Finally, Morris cleared his throat from the doorway. "Mrs. Harper, Mr. Quanah, I apologize for interrupting, but the territorial judge has arrived earlier than expected. He wired the territorial governor by telegraph authorizing U.S. Marshal warrants, and those warrants were relayed within the hour to Fort Douglas and Salt Lake City. Judge Hiram Blackwell. He wishes to begin proceedings immediately. Pike's lawyer is already filing motions for dismissal and claiming the arrest was unlawful." Morris's expression was grim. "We need your testimony, both of you, as soon as Mr. Quanah is able to travel to the courtroom." "I can travel now," Quanah said, attempting to sit up. He went white and swayed. "You will travel in a wheelchair, or you will not travel at all," the nurse said firmly. "Doctor's orders?" So Quanah was wheeled into the makeshift courtroom in Fort Douglas's largest hall, Eliza walking beside him, both flanked by armed soldiers. The room was packed miners, townspeople, military personnel, journalists who had traveled from Salt Lake City once word of the arrest spread. Judge Blackwell was stern elderly with white mutton chops and no tolerance for nonsense. Pike's lawyer, a slick Denver attorney named Harrington, immediately objected to everything. The arrest, the search, the evidence, the jurisdiction. Blackwell shut him down. "This is federal territory, Mr. Harrington. I have full jurisdiction. The evidence was obtained during a legitimate investigation into federal crimes. Your objections are noted and overruled. Now sit down and let the proceedings begin." Over the next 3 days, the prosecution built its case methodically. They called Dr. Bell, who testified about the artifacts in Tunnel 7 and Charlie Garrett's fear. They called Martha Kincaid, who testified about Pike's threats toward Eliza. They called miners who had witnessed suspicious accidents and Pike's suspicious behavior. They submitted the documents Quanah and Eliza had recovered, invoices, manifests, Pike's own ledgers showing payoffs and murder authorization. Then they called Eliza. She took the stand and described everything: Thomas's suspicions, his death, Pike's false debt, claims the evidence they had found the ambush in the gorge. She spoke clearly and precisely, unshaken by Harrington's aggressive cross-examination. "Mrs. Harper," Harrington said with oily courtesy, "is it not true that you were desperate for money, that you might have fabricated these documents to collect a reward?" "There was no reward offered," Eliza said flatly. "And the documents are in Pike's own handwriting, verified by multiple experts. Are you suggesting I am also an expert forger? Perhaps you had help. Perhaps your associate, Mr. Quanah. Is Lakota, you mean to say, and therefore must be dishonest? Eliza's eyes flashed. Mr. Quana has shown more honor in 1 month than your client has in his entire life. He nearly died protecting those documents because he understood their importance not just for justice, but because Pike was robbing his people's graves. That is what this case is really about, Mr. Harrington. Not money, not revenge, but stopping a man who murdered to hide his crimes. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Blackwell banged his gavel. Order, Mrs. Harper, please answer only the questions asked. I did answer it, Your Honor. The answer is no, I did not fabricate anything. The evidence is real. When Quana took the stand the next day, wheeled in still bandaged but alert, his testimony was devastating. He identified the artifacts with precise detail, explaining their sacred significance, describing how each piece would have been made and used, demonstrating knowledge no outsider could fake. He described finding his grandfather's arrowhead, a unique piece with distinctive markings, and the visceral horror of realizing graves had been disturbed. Then he described the ambush, Shadowhawk's betrayal, the choice to draw Pike's men away from Eliza. Harrington tried to shake him, suggesting he was motivated by revenge against whites, that he had stolen the artifacts himself to frame Pike. Why would I steal my own people's sacred objects? Quana asked quietly. Why would I nearly die to return them? Your logic makes no sense, Mr. Harrington. The truth is simple. Pike robbed graves. He sold sacred objects for profit. When my partner's husband discovered this, Pike had him murdered. When we discovered the same Pike sent men to kill us, we survived. He did not escape justice. That is what happened. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict was unanimous, on all counts guilty. Judge Blackwell sentenced Pike to death by hanging for the murder of Thomas Harper. Additional sentences for trafficking, desecration, fraud, and conspiracy were rendered moot by the death sentence, but Blackwell read them into the record anyway. 40 years combined had Pike lived to serve them. Mr. Pike, Blackwell said coldly, you have brought shame upon this territory and upon the mining profession. You have murdered an honest man to conceal theft. You have desecrated sites sacred to the native peoples of this land. You have corrupted law enforcement and endangered innocent families. The law allows me no mercy, and in this case, I would grant none, even if I could. You will hang by the neck until dead. May God have mercy on your soul, for this court has none. Pike was led away in chains, his face ashen. Sheriff Lott, who had been arrested as accessory after the fact, received 10 years hard labor. Several of Pike's men turned state's evidence and received lighter sentences. 2 who had participated in the ambush were sentenced to 5 years each. The stolen artifacts, over 200 pieces in total, were formally returned to the Lakota Nation in a ceremony at Fort Douglas. Tribal elders came to accept them wearing traditional dress, singing mourning songs for the disturbed dead. Quana stood with them, still weak, but refusing to remain seated, and spoke in Lakota about the recovery, about the importance of returning these objects to their rightful rest, about the white woman who had risked everything to help make this possible. The elders listened gravely. Then one, an ancient man with snow-white braids, placed his hand on Quana's shoulder. You have honored our ancestors, the elders said in English, for the benefit of the assembled soldiers and civilians. You have shown that honor exists across the boundaries whites try to draw between peoples. This woman, he gestured to Eliza, she has also honored us. She is welcome among our people, as are you, Silent Rain, always. The ceremony was formal, dignified, and moving. Even hardened soldiers stood with heads bowed as the elders blessed the artifacts and prepared them for reburial at proper sites with full ritual. Afterward, Captain Morris approached Quana and Eliza with papers. The territorial governor, in recognition of your service in exposing this corruption, has issued a formal land grant. 160 acres in Echo Canyon jointly deeded to both of you. Clear title, no debts tax exempt for 5 years. There is also restitution from Pike's seized assets. His mine shares his property, his bank accounts. They are being divided among his victims. Your shares come to $300 each. Eliza stared at the papers. Jointly deeded to both of us. The governor's exact words were that you acted as partners in service to justice and should be recognized as such. Territorial law permits such arrangements when extraordinary circumstances warrant. This certainly qualifies. Morris handed them the deed. Additionally, the new mine owners, a reputable Denver company, have offered a standing contract for Mr. Quana to consult on proper land management and native site identification. They wish to avoid future complications. The pay is $50 per month. $50 a month. It was a fortune by frontier standards. Combined with the land and the cash payment, they suddenly had a future real, tangible, secure. We can build, Eliza said slowly. Expand the cabin. Buy stock chickens, maybe a cow. Seed for proper crops. And I can buy proper tools, Quana added. Good traps, better weapons for hunting. A wagon for hauling. Materials to build a larger house, one with room for all of us. They looked at each other, and in that moment both realized they were making plans together, assuming a shared future, speaking of we and our, without conscious thought. It had happened so gradually through shared danger, mutual trust, and the practical necessities of survival, that neither could pinpoint exactly when partnership had become something deeper. We should formalize this, Eliza said. Not a traditional marriage, perhaps. I do not know if territorial law would recognize such between. She hesitated, unsure how to phrase it delicately. Between a white woman and a Lakota man. Quana finished. Probably not in most jurisdictions, though some places are more tolerant than others. But perhaps we do not need the law's blessing in every court. We have the land grant, which recognizes our partnership legally. We have these children who need both of us. We have proven we work well together. He paused. What we need is a clear agreement between us, honest terms, about what we each expect, what we each provide, how we make decisions together. And then, if we choose, we can seek whatever formal recognition is available. A contract of partnership first, Eliza said. Practical, clear, enforceable between us, even if not recognized by every court. Then we build from there. Exactly. No false promises about grand passion or romantic love, though we seem to have found both anyway. Quana smiled slightly. Just honest commitment to work together, raise these children together, build something lasting together. They spent that evening in Dr. Bell's cabin, where they had been staying during the trial, drafting their agreement with Bell and Kincaid as witnesses. It was practical and specific joint ownership of property shared responsibility. For all 4 children, equal voice in major decisions, commitment to remain partners for the children's sake. At minimum, until the youngest reached adulthood, honest communication about concerns or dissatisfaction and mutual promises to treat each other with respect, fidelity, and affection. When they signed, Kincaid said dryly, "This is possibly the least romantic marriage agreement I have ever witnessed, and also possibly the most sensible." "That is the point," Eliza said. "Romance is lovely in theory, but it does not cut firewood or feed children or survive frontier winters. Partnership and commitment do those things. The romance is a bonus, but the foundation is partnership." "Amen," said Bell, adding his witness signature with a flourish. The fort chaplain, when asked, agreed to conduct a blessing ceremony, not a full marriage rite since regulations were unclear, but a formal acknowledgement of their partnership and family. It was brief and simple, conducted in the fort chapel with the children, Belle Kincaid Morris, and a handful of soldiers as witnesses. Do you, Quanah, called Silent Rain, pledge to honor this partnership, to stand with Eliza Harper, to care for these children as your own, and to build a life together founded on mutual respect and trust? I do. And do you, Eliza Harper, pledge to honor this partnership, to stand with Quanah, to care for these children as your own, and to build a life together founded on mutual respect and trust? I do. Then, by the authority vested in me, I recognize this partnership and this family. May God bless you and keep you all. It was not traditional. It was not legally ironclad everywhere. But it was real, witnessed, and binding in the ways that mattered most. They returned to Echo Canyon in early April as the prairie greened and wildflowers began to bloom. The community's reception was mixed. Some welcomed them with genuine warmth, grateful for their exposure of Pike's corruption. Others harbored prejudice against Quanah and disapproved of their unconventional arrangement. But enough respected what they had accomplished that they were grudgingly accepted. Dr. Bell relocated his practice to a better building with Eliza, assisting him several days a week, using her apothecary knowledge learned from her father. The income supplemented Quanah's consulting work nicely. Martha Kincaid resumed teaching at the schoolhouse with Star and Little Elk, and Peter, all attending regularly. Star proved to be gifted with languages and numbers. Little Elk excelled at natural sciences. Peter loved stories and had a talent for drawing. Quanah and Eliza spent the spring and summer transforming their homestead. Using their combined savings, they hired local carpenters and laborers to expand the cabin into a proper house. 2 stories, 4 bedrooms, a large kitchen, a sitting room, and a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides. They cleared additional land for crops: wheat, corn, vegetables. They built a proper barn and acquired livestock: chickens for eggs, 2 cows for milk, pigs for meat, horses for work and riding. They worked side by side daily, falling into comfortable rhythms of shared labor. Quanah handled hunting, heavy construction, land management, and consultation work at the mine. Eliza managed the household medical assistance for Dr. Bell, education coordination with Kincaid, and the complex social navigation required to maintain their position in the community. The children thrived. Little Elk's strength returned fully, and he began teaching Peter and Star traditional Lakota skills: tracking, plant identification, respectful interaction with animals. Peter shared his reading skills and his drawings. Star, now speaking freely, and often proved to be the diplomatic bridge between cultures, translating both language and customs with ease that surprised everyone. One evening, in late August, after the children were asleep and they sat on the expanded porch watching sunset paint the canyon walls gold and crimson, Eliza said quietly, "I need to tell you something." Quanah, who had been carving a toy horse for Peter, looked up. "Tell me." "When we made our agreement, I said I did not expect romantic love, just partnership and commitment." "I remember." I agreed. "Well." She hesitated, then continued firmly, "I find I may have been inaccurate in that assessment. Somewhere between the mine ambush and the trial and building this house, I seem to have developed feelings beyond mere partnership. Feelings I did not account for in our contract." Quanah set down his carving, his expression carefully neutral. "What kind of feelings?" "The inconvenient kind," she said with a slight smile. "The kind where I wake hoping to see you first thing and go to sleep hoping you will still be here in the morning. The kind where I find excuses to work near you just to hear your voice. The kind where I imagine our future together, not just as co-parents, but as..." She stopped suddenly, uncertain. "As husband and wife, in more than name. As lovers in truth. Would that be unwelcome?" He was silent so long she feared she had ruined everything. Then he said, "When I was delirious from fever in that snow shelter, certain I was dying, I dreamed. Not of my first wife, though I loved her deeply and honor her memory still. I dreamed of you, of your voice calling me back, of your hand in mine, of a future where I woke beside you every morning, not out of duty but desire, where we shared not just work and children, but everything. When I woke in the army hospital and found you there holding my hand, I did not want to let go. Not then, not ever. But you did let go," she pointed out gently, "because I thought it was just gratitude and relief. Because I assumed you saw me only as the partner we agreed to be. Because I am Lakota and you are English, and society makes such things." He gestured helplessly. "Complicated. Dangerous sometimes. I did not want to presume. Did not want to burden you with expectations beyond what we had agreed." "Complicated and dangerous we can manage," Eliza said. "We have already proven that. And you are not a burden. You are—" She searched for words. "You are the person I want, not just need. Want. For yourself. For who you are." Quanah reached out slowly and took her hand, the gesture both familiar from their ordeal and entirely new in its intention. "Then, I will tell you plainly, I have come to love you, Eliza Harper. Not just as partner or co-parent, but as the woman I wish to spend my life beside in all ways. I love your strength and your clever mind, and the way you never flinch from hard truth. I love how you care for my children as fiercely as your own. I love how you look at sunset over the canyon, with that expression of contentment like you have finally found home. And I love—" He paused, then continued with quiet intensity. "I love how you make me want to be better, to be worthy of your trust and affection." Tears pricked Eliza's eyes. "And I love you, Quanah, Silent Rain. I love your integrity and your courage, and the gentleness you show the children despite all the hardness life has demanded of you. I love how you honor your ancestors while adapting to survive in this changed world. I love that you make me feel safe and valued and heard in ways I never experienced before, even in my first marriage. And I love that you saw me, truly saw me, when I was at my lowest and most desperate, and chose to trust me anyway." They sat holding hands, watching the last light fade from the canyon walls, and both felt the shift from partnership of necessity to partnership of choice, from convenient alliance to genuine bond, from survival strategy to love freely given. "So," Quanah said eventually, "do we amend our contract, add a clause about love and romance?" Eliza laughed, the sound bright and free. "I think perhaps some things do not need contracts. Some things we simply live and let grow naturally. That is wise." He stood drawing her up with him, and they stood close in the gathering darkness. "But I would like if you are willing to make a new promise. Not legal, not written. Just between us." "What promise?" "I promise to love you not just today, but all my days. To stand with you through whatever comes, good harvest or bad sickness or health acceptance or prejudice. To build this life together, not from necessity, but from choice. To honor you as my wife, in truth and in heart, regardless of what any law or court or society says. That is my promise. What is yours?" "I promise the same," Eliza said, her voice steady and sure. "To love you, stand with you, choose you every day. To honor you as my husband in truth and in heart. To build this family and this life together, come what may." She smiled slightly. "And to occasionally remind you to come inside when you are too absorbed in carving toys to notice you are freezing. That is fair division of labor." They sealed it with a kiss, deep and tender years of tension and denied attraction and hard-won trust finally given full expression. When they parted, both were smiling. From inside the house, a small voice called, "Mama, Papa, are you coming to bed?" They looked at each other. "Papa, comment ça?" Quanah whispered, still moved every time he heard it from Peter's lips. "You are his papa now," Eliza said. "Just as I am Star's mama. That is what it means to be family, not blood, but choice and love and daily commitment." They went inside together, checked on all 4 children tucked in and safe, and theirs then retired to their own room. The house was still being finished in places, but it was home. The future was still uncertain in many ways, but they would face it together. That night, their partnership became a marriage in full truth, physical intimacy joining the emotional and practical bonds they had forged. It was tender and hesitant at first. Both had been long without such connection, but grew natural and right, the physical expression of everything they had become to each other. Afterward, lying in the darkness, Eliza whispered, "I did not expect this. When you rode up to my cabin all those months ago, I saw only threat and desperation. I never imagined." "Neither did I," Quanah said. "I saw only a white woman who might turn me away like all the others. I never imagined finding home, finding you. We found each other. That is what matters." They slept entwined safe in the home they had built, surrounded by the family they had formed. 2 years later, autumn 1872. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the expanded homestead as Quanah stood on the porch watching his children play in the yard. Star, now 6 and speaking with confidence and joy, was teaching little Elk and Peter a complex clapping game, all 3 laughing when they missed the rhythm. In his arms, wrapped in a soft blanket embroidered with both Lakota geometric patterns and English flowers, was baby Rose, 4 months old, with her father's dark eyes and her mother's stubborn chin, and a lusty cry that left no doubt about her needs. Their daughter, born of love that had grown from partnership, proof that their family was no longer one of necessity, but of choice and genuine devotion. Eliza emerged from the house, carrying a basket of vegetables from their garden: tomatoes, squash beans. She had filled out in the 2 years of security, her face less gaunt, her eyes less haunted. She set the basket down and came to stand beside Quanah, leaning against his shoulder, as she had done countless times, the gesture as natural as breathing. "Rose needs feeding soon," she said, "but let me just enjoy this moment." "What moment?" "This, all of this. Our children playing safely, our land producing food, our home solid and warm. You beside me." She looked up at him. 2 years ago, I was alone and terrified, about to lose everything. Now I have more than I ever dreamed possible. "We have more," Quanah corrected gently. "We, Eliza, not you alone." "Yes, we." She smiled. "I am still getting used to that, to not being alone, Doctor." Bell rode up on his horse, dismounting with less stiffness than he once had. Eliza's herbal treatments had eased his chronic pain considerably. "Came to check on the baby," he announced, though everyone knew he mostly came for companionship and Eliza's good coffee. "She is thriving," Eliza said, taking Rose from Quanah to show Bell. "Growing like a weed, eating constantly, keeping us awake at night with her demands." Bell examined the baby with professional thoroughness, then pronounced her perfect. Healthy lungs, certainly. I could hear her from the road. They sat on the porch, Quanah, Eliza, Bell drinking coffee and watching the children. Martha Kincaid arrived next, bringing books for the children and news from town. "The mine is doing well under new management," she reported. "Fair wages, safety improvements, and they have asked if you," she nodded to Quanah, "would be willing to expand your consulting work. They are opening a new section and want to ensure no sacred sites are disturbed. Quanah looked surprised and pleased. They asked specifically, by name. Your reputation has spread far beyond Echo Canyon now. The man who recovered sacred artifacts brought a corrupt foreman to justice, who proved that honor transcends race and culture. People respect that. Well, she amended, most people. There are still those who... She trailed off delicately. Who disapprove of our family? Eliza finished calmly. Yes, we know. But their disapproval matters less each year. We have proven ourselves, built something real. Those who matter have accepted us. More than accepted, Belle said. You have become pillars of this community. Eliza, your medical assistance, has saved lives. Quanah, your consulting has prevented conflicts with the tribes. Your children are well-behaved and well-educated. You pay your debts and help your neighbors. That counts for more than prejudice in the long run. As the sun set and their friends departed, Quanah and Eliza called the children inside for supper. The house that had been built with their combined labor now rang with the sounds of family children arguing cheerfully about who would set the table, baby Rose fussing to be fed the clatter of dishes and the crackle of the cook stove. After the children were bathed and put to bed, Little Elk and Peter sharing one room, Star in her own small bedroom, Rose in a cradle beside Eliza and Quanah's bed, the couple sat together in their bedroom in the quiet darkness. Do you ever regret it? Eliza asked softly. Stopping here that day, asking for help, everything that followed? Never. Not one moment. Quanah's hand found hers in the darkness. You and these children and this life, this is more than I dreamed possible when I rode up to a stranger's cabin with a sick child and desperate hope. You gave me back not just hope, but purpose, future, love. Do you regret saying yes? Never. She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. We have built something good here, something lasting. Our children are safe, happy, thriving. We have a home that is truly ours. We have respect earned, not given. We have each other. She paused. And we have Rose. Proof that what we built is real and enduring. More than I deserved, Quanah said quietly. After all the failures, all the losses, I did not think I deserved this kind of happiness. You fought for it. We both did. We earned this. Eliza lifted her head to look at him in the dimness. And we will keep fighting for it. Whatever comes, prejudice, hardship, drought, any of it, we will face it together. Together, Quanah agreed. Always. Later, as they lay in bed with Rose sleeping peacefully in her cradle, Eliza said drowsily, I love you. I love you? Quanah replied the words as natural and necessary as breathing. They had not sought romance, had not expected love. They had sought only survival partnership, a way to protect their children through brutal circumstances. But they had found something far greater, a bond forged in hardship and proven through trial, a love that was earned, rather than assumed, chosen daily, rather than taken for granted. It was not the fairy tale of novels or the romantic ballads sung in saloons. It was better, it was real, tested, and enduring. It was a partnership built on respect and trust and practical necessity that had bloomed into genuine devotion. It was a family created not by blood alone, but by choice and commitment and daily acts of care. It was home in the truest sense, not just a place, but people who chose to stand together against whatever came. The October wind that had brought Quanah to Eliza's cabin 2 years ago had seemed like a harbinger of disaster. But it had actually been the beginning of something neither had dared hope for: redemption, renewal, and a love that would endure all the hardships the frontier could throw at them. Outside, that same October wind whispered through the canyon, carrying the scent of coming winter. But inside their home, surrounded by their children, warm and safe, and loved Quanah and Eliza slept peacefully. They had survived. They had overcome. They had built a life worth fighting for. And that, in the end, was everything that mattered. Epilogue. Spring 1875. 3 years after their partnership began, 5 years after Pike's execution, the homestead had grown into something remarkable. The house now had 6 bedrooms, 1 for each older child, 1 for Rose, now nearly 3, and 1 prepared for the new baby expected in summer. The barn housed 8 horses, a dozen cattle, countless chickens, and 2 goats. The fields produced enough wheat and corn to sell surplus at market. The orchard Quanah had planted was bearing its first apples and pears. More importantly, the family had grown in less tangible ways. Little Elk, now 12, had begun apprenticing with a surveyor in Salt Lake City, putting his natural skills with mathematics and mapping to professional use. Star, 9 years old, was being courted by a professor from the Territorial University who wanted her to attend. When she came of age, her linguistic abilities were exceptional. Peter, now 11, had sold his first drawing to a newspaper and dreamed of becoming an illustrator. Quanah's consulting work had expanded beyond the local mine to encompass half the territory. He was regularly called to mediate between mining companies, ranchers, and tribes, his reputation for fairness and deep knowledge making him invaluable. The Lakota elders had formally adopted Eliza into the tribe in recognition of her role in recovering the sacred artifacts, giving her a name in their language, Walks Between Worlds. Eliza's medical work with Dr. Bell had evolved into a formal partnership. They had opened a proper clinic in town, with Eliza handling most routine cases and Bell handling surgery and complex diagnoses. Her apothecary knowledge combined with practical frontier experience made her highly sought after. The prejudice that had once threatened them had not disappeared, but it had diminished to manageable levels. They had allies now, Morris promoted to major and still commanding at Fort Douglas, who sent them regular correspondence and occasional visits. Bell and Kincaid, who remained close friends and honorary grandparents to the children. Thomas Rooker, who had found redemption through steady work and had become like an uncle to the family. And dozens of others, miners, ranchers, townspeople, who had come to respect what they had built. On a warm April afternoon, Quanah and Eliza stood on their porch watching Rose chase chickens with determination, her dark curls bouncing. Eliza's hand rested on her slightly rounded belly, feeling the flutter of new life. "What should we name this one?" she asked. "If a boy, perhaps Thomas for your first husband, to honor his memory and the justice we won for him." Eliza's eyes misted. "That would be fitting. And if a girl, Willow, perhaps, for the tree that saved Little Elk's life, for flexibility and strength." "I like that." She leaned against him, completely comfortable. "Either way, this child will be born into a very different world than their siblings were. Safety, security, family that is large and loving. Thanks to you. To us. Yes, to us." She looked up at him. "I know I have said it before, but I need you to hear it again. Thank you for not riding past my cabin that day. Thank you for asking for help instead of trying to survive alone. Thank you for trusting me when you had every reason not to. And thank you for saying yes when you had every reason to refuse. For taking the risk. For becoming my partner first and then my love." Quanah kissed her forehead gently. "Everything good in my life now traces back to that moment. To your courage in opening that door." They stood together in the afternoon sun, watching their daughter play, listening to their older children laughing inside as they studied, feeling the promise of new life growing between them. The land stretched before them, their land earned and defended and loved. The future stretched ahead, uncertain in specifics, but secure in its foundation. They had faced the storm together and emerged stronger. They had forged a partnership that became a family. They had built a home that was more than walls and roof. It was safety, love, and belonging. And as the sun set over Echo Canyon, painting the sandstone cliffs in shades of gold, and Rose Quanah and Eliza stood together, knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, they would face them as they had faced everything else. Together,